What's up, guys? It's time to talk about the Big Ten. The last two national champions have come from this conference, and some people are thinking that this may be the best conference in the country. But where do the teams stack up in this conference? Well, let's go ahead and get right into it, starting with the bottom of the barrel, the Purdue Boilermakers. And Purdue fans, let's be real, 2025 is going to test your patience. Barry Odom was the smart hire. He's mature, he's disciplined, he knows defenses, and he's a really good guy, but he walked into probably the worst roster situation in the entire Power Four. Last year they went 1-11, and that's about as painful as it gets. At least you got the one win, but that's not really much of a prize, really. On offense, who knows what we're going to get. There's a new quarterback, and whoever wins the job there is probably not going to make a difference. The wide receiver room is patchwork, full of transfers and unknowns. They do have a bright spot in their tight end room. They have a guy returning from injury, and he could be a security blanket. But really, the only true proven piece is Devin Mockobee, and they're probably going to lean on him until his legs fall off. But if the O-line can't hold, then it's not really going to matter what Mockobee does. On defense, it's a total reset. Basically, an all-transfer front and back seven. And that sounds scary, but when you gave up as many points as Purdue did last year, a reset is not the worst idea. But still, don't expect miracles. There's new faces, a new system, and that usually means rough early weeks and probably rough all 12 weeks for Purdue. The silver lining here is, though, that Odom can build something. He did solid work at Missouri, and I think he learned under some really solid guys. But the roster is just years away from scaring anyone in this conference, and really anyone, period. 2025 is about small wins, competing in games they normally would get blown out in, developing an identity, and maybe pulling up a surprise upset maybe. Best case scenario is still probably about 3 to 4 wins and just hoping for 2026 to be better. Worst case is another single win or 0 win game and more pain. Either way, Purdue fans should buckle up. It's going to take some time, but Odom is the right step. At number 15, I have the Maryland Terrapins. And last year, I said that Maryland was going to be special, that they were going to surprise everyone, and they did surprise me by being terrible. This year, I'm not falling for it. I'm guarding my heart. On offense, there are just way too many questions. Only 3 starters return, and that's rough no matter how you spin it. Quarterback is a total mystery, but whoever wins that job is going to inherit a pretty solid wide receiver room. They have Octavian Smith Jr., plus some transfers in Jalil Farouk from Oklahoma and Caleb Webb from Tennessee. And Nolan Ray, he can tote the rock, so there is some depth at running back. The real problem here, though, is the offensive line. Last year, bottom 10 nationally in sacks allowed and havoc rate. This year, still looks thin, unproven, and portal heavy, but we'll see. It really doesn't matter who plays quarterback if he's running for his life the whole time. That can really just kill drives before they even start. On defense, it's maybe addition by subtraction here. There's a new defensive coordinator stepping in, which is good because last year's defense was historically awful at stopping the run. They're replacing nearly the entire front, and that sounds pretty scary, but also those guys weren't really stopping anyone in the first place. Secondary has a couple of returners who can play, but depth is still scary thin. So what it really comes down to here is that the O-line needs to gel fast, and that new defensive coordinator needs to work some magic for them to have any hope here. If that happens, they could flirt with bowl eligibility, but if not, it feels more like a 3-4 season right now. Big picture, Loxley, his seat isn't hot yet, at least I don't think so, but it definitely could get warm if the rebuild sputters. I'd love to be wrong again, but my gut says 2025 Maryland is going to look a lot like 2024 Maryland, only with a few different names on jerseys. And at 14, I have Northwestern, and they may not be anywhere close to the best of the conference, but there is hope here. Offensive coordinator Zach Lujan comes over fresh off of an FCS national title run, bringing in modern spread concepts, and this offense badly needed something like this. At quarterback, they have Preston Stone, the SMU transfer. He's got a solid arm, good mobility, and actually pretty good starting experience, a clear upgrade. I don't know if many of you guys remember, but he actually had a lot of hype last season before losing his starting job to Kevin Jennings. So the talent is definitely there. Surprisingly, they have a pretty stable O-line. They're deeper than people realize with 4 guys who logged starts last year. The running back room is not super flashy, but there are still plenty of solid options to run behind the line. They had some big additions like wide receiver Griffin Wild, who transferred. He gives them a field stretcher they lacked before. On defense, it's quietly the team's strength. The front four is sneaky good, and they can generate pressure without blitzing every single down, which is definitely nice. The linebackers are experienced, tough, and smart. Secondary is probably better than most people realize, a mix of returning starters and some portal depth. This unit can keep them in games and could be even better in 2025 than they were last year. So what does the ceiling look like for this team? They're not suddenly going to jump into playoff talks by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think they're any longer guaranteed as a W on everyone's schedule. Could they grind out 5 and 6 wins and sneak into a bowl? Absolutely. If Stone settles in fast and the wide receiver room proves functional, that could definitely happen. I think I'm going to call this year step one of a proper rebuild here. If they show real fight and pull off an upset or two, I'm going to call this mission accomplished. It's not always going to be pretty, but I don't think it's going to be last year's rock fight either. At number 13, I have the Michigan State Spartans, and it's year 2 under Jonathan Smith. The buzz is definitely real, but for me, 2025 still feels like a bridge year between promise and real contention. Quarterback Aiden Childs, he is the reason for hope here. He's got a big arm, he's got quick feet, and he flashed some poise last season in his freshman year. The staff also added in wide receiver Omari Kelly from Auburn. He should help stretch the field. They also added running back Elijah Tolliver from UTEP. He brings speed they just didn't have last year. The offensive line is still patchwork, but they're better than the revolving door they were last year. This offseason, they went heavy in the portal, bringing in multiple Power 4 transfers. If they gel quickly, Childs finally gets the pass protection he might need and the running support he needs to take that next step. On defense, the pass rush is the elephant in the room here. They had one of the worst sack rates in the Big Ten, and they hit the portal for help for sure, but there's not really any instant impact players or superstars that showed up, in my opinion. Asking that secondary to cover forever just isn't realistic, and that could be their fatal flaw. Secondary is fine, nothing elite, but not really a glaring weakness either. The linebacker room is scrappy. They do return some experience, which should help limit big plays, but if the front can't generate heat, that really doesn't matter how good your DBs are. Eventually, they're going to break. So what's the real outlook here? The team could absolutely pull an upset against a team like UCLA, Indiana, or even Washington, but it still, to me, feels like a 5 to 6 win season unless Childs can play at an all-conference level and the pass rush is just magically better. The big picture here, though, is that Smith is building something that should be special by 2026, but 2025 is more about growing pains, Childs learning on the job, and just finding out who else can be a core part of that team long term. Still not quite ready yet, but you can definitely see the blueprint starting to come together. At number 12, I have the Wisconsin Badgers, and 2025 feels like a return to what made Wisconsin, and I think that might finally get them back on track. On offense, they bring in a new offensive coordinator who seems to favor the old flavor of ground and pound, play action, and ball control rather than the modern throw-it-everywhere experiment that was just a total flop there the prior years. Quarterback Billy Edwards transferred in from Maryland, and he's not going to light up the stat sheet, but he fits. He is not a game breaker, but with this system, he doesn't really have to be. The ground game is going to be the real heartbeat here. They have a running back duo of Dylan Jones and Darren Dupree, who look like a classic Badger Thunder and Thunder approach. Neither is going to be Jonathan Taylor, but they're tough runners who can handle big workloads. And if Wisconsin ends up winning games, it's going to be because they ran it 40-plus times and dared you to stop them. The O-line is getting big again. They got bullied last year, words that haven't been said about Wisconsin often in the past. So they reloaded, they added bulk, toughness, and a couple transfers like Charles Perkins to stiffen things up. And that interior should be solid. Tackles need to prove that they can protect just enough to set up play action. And the passing game is taking a less is more approach. The new OC won't ask Edwards to do much, like I mentioned. They did add wide receiver Jaden Ballard from OSU, and he adds needed speed here, someone to keep safeties honest. The tight end room is actually a pretty steady room with some solid options, good for short yardage situations and in the red zone. Success here looks like 180 yards passing, no picks, and a couple of big play action shots a game. Defense is Fickell's wheelhouse. They got pushed around last year and they know it, so they added size and depth up front, especially with Perkins. The linebackers are solid and the secondary is quietly a strength for this team. 4 starters back, a veteran group that should keep them competitive against pass-heavy attacks. The big question is, will they really commit to this style of play? If they do, they play slow, control the clock, run, trust defense. Wisconsin can drag better teams into ugly, close games, total rock fights. But if not, we could see a pretty stuck in the middle, still searching for an identity team that is barely bowl eligible. But I think the ceiling here is 8-4. They can upset a few big names by running it down their throats. So that's where I see Wisconsin. At number 11, I have the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, and they've been patient and quietly they are turning into one of those teams nobody wants to play, even if they're not ready to truly break through. On offense, there's a blend of stability and some new faces. They have quarterback Ethan Kaliakmanis. He returns, and that's a big deal. He's got some experience plus some familiarity with the system. He wasn't particularly great last year, but he was solid. He threw for over 2,000 yards, and he should keep improving. As far as the running back room goes, they don't have Kyle Monangai anymore, and it's now the Antoine Raymond show. He's not the same workhorse, but he can be more explosive, and he can change the pace of the game. If the O-line gives him the lanes, he could break bigger plays than Monangai did, but again, I don't expect him to fill those shoes. At wide receiver, they lost some production, but they do have some new guys coming in from the portal and some young guys ready to step in. It's not a star-studded group, but it is competent. The interior O-line is quietly strong. They have some real Big Ten size. Biggest question mark, though, is still the tackles. If they hold up, the offense could quietly surprise. Run defense did struggle badly last year. Coaches hit the portal hard, and they added some bigger bodies up front, some thicker guys to clog the middle. Secondary is interesting. They mixed some transfers with some developed players, kind of like has been the theme throughout a lot of these different position groups. They should be better, though they might give up some bigger plays early on as they start to gel. But the linebacker room, that's the wild card. Flashes last year, but they still need to be more consistent. So what's the plan for the Rutgers? Just stay balanced, don't beat themselves, and win in the margins. And that means special teams, red zone stops, and turnovers. They can't out-talent teams like Ohio State, but they can force you to play uncomfortable, close games. So for me, I think the ceiling for this team is about 7-5, maybe knock off a ranked team in an ugly home game. But the floor is about 4-8 if the O-line and defense just don't come together. At number 12, I have the Minnesota Golden Gophers. And last year was gritty, but a bit uneven. Now, PJ Fleck is rowing the boat into 2025 with some real questions and some sneaky reasons for optimism. Drake Lindsey, he sat behind Max Brosmer last year, who brought a veteran stability, and now it is the Lindsey show. He has a huge frame, big arm, big potential, and if he's ready, Minnesota could actually get better quarterback play out of him, but that is a big if. They lost their top 2 receivers, which means we should expect a return to the classic Gopher football, which is pounding the rock. Running back Darius Taylor is a beast. He's one of the conference's best kept secrets. He can handle volume and break tackles, but he's going to need some help. Along the O-line, they are replacing 3 starters, which is never ideal, especially for a run-heavy team like Minnesota. And there's experience among those new starters, but the unit just has to gel really fast. Likely better in run blocking and pass protection early on. Defense should be like a punch-you-in-the-mouth style of ball. They promoted a defensive coordinator from within, and he keeps the same system, tough, disciplined, grinded out. The defensive line is quietly nasty. 4 of the top 17 defensive linemen in the Big Ten are on this team. They should have a solid pass rush and should be able to stuff the run pretty well. Linebackers are experienced, they're smart, they're steady. Secondary, there's a lot of new faces, but there is talent. Expect early growing pains that should end up settling towards the middle of the season. As for their ceiling, I think if Lindsey clicks, Taylor runs wild, and the defense stays top half in the league, they could get 8-9 wins, but the floor, I think, is about 4-5 if the quarterback struggles and the offensive line just can't protect. At number 11, I have the UCLA Bruins, and things have suddenly got way more fun in Westwood, and it's mostly thanks to one name that I'm going to say correctly, Nico Iamaleava. Got it. Nico changes everything. Former 5-star quarterback from Tennessee. He's a huge arm, mobility, charisma. Just by stepping on campus, he raises that team's ceiling. And pair that with a new offensive coordinator from Indiana's surprisingly great offense last year, and you have legit hope for fireworks. And Nico has some weapons to work with. Wide receiver Quasi Gilmer is a returning star, and he could explode with a real quarterback like Nico. They also have a tight end who missed all of 2024 with injury. He's back, and he's healthy. Running back Javian Thomas from Cal, he's shifty, he can catch out of the backfield. He is also a really solid threat. UCLA's run game was terrible last year, near the bottom nationally, but with Thomas and the portal linemen that they have coming in, they could go from being one of the worst to being kind of middle of the pack, which is a massive upgrade for a team like this. On defense, they are salty up front and thin behind. The front seven is tough, they're physical, they're experienced, and they should be able to stop the run pretty well. The linebacker room, they did lose 3 starters, but the coaching staff trusts their development and the pipeline they have there, but depth is definitely still a concern here. Secondary is built through the transfer portal, so again, high risk, high reward, but if the front dominates, it can cover up for those secondary growing pains. The ceiling here is probably 8 to 9 wins. That would probably require Nico to, shine like I expect him to. The offense maybe to jump into that top 25 range and the defense to hold. Maybe they're a dark horse for even a New Year's Six Bowl. We'll see. But the floor here, though, is 5 to 6 wins, I think, if the O-line is shaky and the defense has some injuries. At number 10, I have the Indiana Hoosiers. And last year was not some Cinderella Mickey Mouse run. It was legit. And now the question is, can they do it again with a new quarterback? Enter Fernando Mendoza from Cal. He's not really a superstar, but he's steady, he's smart, and he already has some chemistry with the wide receiver they brought in Jonathan Brady, who followed him from Cal. And I think it's always a great sign when a receiver follows a quarterback through the transfer portal because it kind of shows that he trusts that guy enough to literally pick up his stuff and move to wherever he's throwing the ball. And Mendoza is going to be throwing to some pretty solid wide receivers, including returners Elijah Surratt and Amar Cooper. Quietly one of the most underrated receiver groups in the conference. But I think the biggest upgrade to this Indiana offense was the trenches. The O-line was a question last year, to say the least, but now it's a strength. They have some returning starters, excellent portal pickups, and legitimate depth. Sure, they might lose a little bit of that run game without Justice Ellison, but Kalen Black is a solid back, and the depth is better than it looks on paper. Let's look at defense now, though. Remember, all the guys that Curt Cignetti brought in from James Madison, they balled out in the Big Ten last year, and they're back. I know we had some questions about that last year, how they had performed. Well, they performed well, and they're back. The defensive line is ferocious. They have a great pass rush, the best part of the unit. The linebackers, they're athletic, experienced, they're physical. Secondary, it's full of playmakers, and they trust the scheme. The bottom line is that this defense is not quite elite like Michigan or Iowa, but it's tough, it's disruptive, and it keeps Indiana in games. As for the ceiling, I think if quarterback plays clean, defense keeps up the chaos, another surprise 9-10 season could be coming for Indiana. Maybe even New Year's Six talk. But the floor is probably a little bit of a stall on offense. The run game fades, still scrappy and maybe like bowl eligible, probably around 6 to 7 wins. At number 9, I have the Iowa Hawkeyes. And Iowa has been a team that's played the exact same brand of football for as long as I can remember. Elite defense and pitiful offense. But maybe not for long. This time, there's actual hope on offense, and you might not have to watch the game through your fingers anymore because quarterback transfer Mark Gronowski, who won 2 FCS national championships in South Dakota State, he should be actually solid. He's dual threat, he's athletic, he's decisive. He has way more upside than Cade McNamara ever had. And if the shoulder injury heals fully, he might be the best Iowa quarterback in, well, a long, long time. His floor alone feels higher than what Iowa has rolled out recently. But what about the weapons that he has to throw to? Yes, losing Caleb Johnson, the Big Ten rushing champ, hurts. There's no way around that. But the new quarterback duo is smaller, shiftier, and behind an O-line that returns 3 starters, including an all-conference center in Logan Jones. At wide receiver, someone has to step up. Keep an eye on Jacob Hill. He flashed last year, and now he gets a real quarterback throwing to him. So I could see him making a jump. On defense, they're still the gold standard. The D-line has 3 of the top 4 defensive ends back. Excellent depth, excellent talent. Linebackers, reloading, but it's Iowa. They always figure it out. Secondary is locked down, physical, experienced, and don't forget the hidden weapon, Caden Wetjen, the first team All-American return specialist, and they have an All-American punter. So don't normally talk about special teams, but for Iowa, I think it's a really big specialty that they have going for them. Their special teams plus their defense can win games alone, but adding a little sprinkle of offense can't hurt. And I think it can make Iowa really lethal, honestly. So this team actually has a pretty high ceiling. I could see them doing really, really well, probably around 9 to 10 wins if their defense can, stay as good as they were, special teams can stay as good as they were, and the offense ends up jumping from awful to average. But the floor is same old on offense with a grinded out 7 to 8 wins, but still competitive as always. At number 8, I have the Washington Huskies, and they honestly feel like a quiet contender. It's year 2 under Jedd Fisch, and I think it could be special, but they're going to need some players to step up. Desmond Williams Jr., he's taking over at quarterback. We saw him play in that bowl game against Louisville, and he showed some serious flashes there. He's a dual threat guy. He's creative, but he is still young, and he's raw. Running back Jonah Coleman could be one of the best running backs in the entire country. He's got power. He's got vision. He's got some big playability. The wide receiver room has talent, but they still need some people to step up, some consistent production there to be successful. But the big question mark here is the offensive line. They gave up the most sacks in the Big Ten last year, and that's a kind of stat that's going to define whether you can take that next big step. Fisch attacked the portal, though, to maybe fix that. They added Carver Williams from Kansas State. He definitely helps, but it's a unit that needs chemistry, not just talent. And with a mobile quarterback like Williams Jr., protection doesn't necessarily always have to be perfect, but it cannot be the turnstile it was again. On defense, there's some big steps coming. They brought in a new defensive coordinator in Ryan Walters, who knows how to build an aggressive and opportunistic unit. I think that they have some huge gets from the portal. They have Takario Davis, who's an elite cornerback. He immediately raises the ceiling of this secondary. The front seven has more depth, proven production coming in, should be tougher against the run, and bring on a better pass rush. So for Washington, the ceiling here really is a playoff spot, about 9 to 10 wins in a playoff spot. I think that happens if the defense takes a big jump, if the O-line gels, and if the offense balances run and pass. Yeah, I think they have a really good shot at making the playoffs. The floor is about 7 to 8 wins, I think, if the offensive line is still leaky and the young quarterback is constantly under siege and the defense can't save them. That's when I think it's about 7 to 8 wins, but still not a bad season. At number 7, I have the USC Trojans, and we all know the story here. Points are not the problem, but what about finally stopping somebody? USC is like the inverse of Iowa. They have an incredible offense every year and a pitiful defense. So let's talk about the specialty of their team. As usual, the offense. They are loaded once again. They have a quarterback in Jaden Mayava who is stepping in with a big arm. He's mobile, and in Lincoln Riley's systems, that usually means big numbers. He's the quarterback whisperer, so I expect great quarterback play. I have no concerns about that for this team. Wide receiver Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane, they should be stars. Tight end Lake McCree is back, and he's a steady target. And at running back, Brian Jackson has showed flashes in the bowl game over Texas A&M. If he carries that over, the run game could be better than people expect. But again, let's talk about the defense. That's what people really want to know. They do have some bigger bodies, but can they really deliver? They really hit the portal to get bigger and more physical, especially on the defensive line. They needed that. Depth is better, experience is improved, but the question is, will it matter when they face elite offenses? Secondary is the biggest concern here. There are some new transfers, but it still looks like a pretty big weak spot, and I think Lincoln Riley really needs this defense to step up to honestly secure his job, because even though he's had successful seasons, I still think he's a little bit on the hot seat. As for the ceiling of this team, I think it is 10 plus wins. I think that they could be a playoff team if that defense isn't awful and the offense does what it does. I think they're legit if that happens. But the floor is the same as it has been the past few years. Defense hemorrhaging points with shootouts every week and 7 to 8 wins, but outside of a real title contention. So it's a mixed bag. We'll see if that defense can be better. It was better last year. Hopefully it takes another step this year for USC to, get back on track for where they want to be. All right. Well, the next six teams I like a lot. We're getting to a point in the list where it's really hard to decide where teams should rank. I like all these teams, so a lot of these could be interchangeable. But let's go ahead and get it started with number six, the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And this is the moment history says you circle if you're a Cornhuskers fan. Matt Rule's third year has been the breakout year everywhere else he's coached, and this roster is locked and ready to do the exact same thing. At quarterback, we already know they have Dylan Raiola, the five-star, number one overall recruit. Now, with a full season under his belt, he showed flashes last year. Now, reports say he's slimmed down. He can add mobility, and he should be really, really solid this upcoming season. The offensive line, quietly one of the deepest units in the Big Ten, built through the portal and returning experience. They have running back Emmett Johnson, who should be able to thrive behind that offensive line, both as a runner and as a receiver. Speaking of receivers, the wide receiver room got some new faces from the portal to give Raiola more options. At tight end, that is a bit of a question mark, but offensive weapons overall look so much better. The defense has some new faces, but I expect the same toughness. They did lose their defensive coordinator, Tony White, and anchor Ty Robinson, but they added Marquez Watson-Trent from the Sun Belt. He was a defensive player of the year there at linebacker. They also added Dason McCullough from Oklahoma. He is a freak athlete at linebacker and edge. Front seven should stay physical and disciplined. Rules teams never get pushed around, so red zone and third down defense, that's what needs some work. And we're going to have to wait and see if that new defensive coordinator can fix those issues. As for the ceiling for this team, like I said, Nebraska is a Big Ten title contender. They could have like 11 wins, I think. Offensive line, they could dominate. They could have a top 20 defense. I think that's very possible for this team. But the floor for this team, I would say, is probably still bowl eligible, but just outside the playoff talk. I think that would happen if the offense is only slightly better and the new defensive coordinator can't keep this defense elite. But I really lean more towards the ceiling than the floor, probably somewhere in the middle of those two. At number 5, I have Illinois. And if you are looking for a Big Ten dark horse, here they are. Last year, it was Indiana that shocked the world by playing physical, tough football and pushing their way into a playoff spot. And this year, I think Illinois is built to do that exact same thing. They have an offense that's full of grown men up front and a quarterback in Luke Altmaier that is back and battle tested. He's steady, he's mobile enough, and he knows the system. But their biggest advantage is that offensive line. They have a full set of starting guys returning, maybe the most underrated unit in the conference. That line plus multiple capable backs means Illinois will be able to pound the rock and control tempo in so many games. The one question mark here is the wide receiver room. They did lose some talent there, and the replacements are solid, but not quite stars. But don't sleep on the tight ends to fill in those gaps as well. On defense, they are nasty and experienced. Xavier Scott is one of the best linebackers in the Big Ten. He's an excellent blitzer. Dylan Rosek, he is a tackling machine. He's back and better after injury, hopefully. The defensive line lost guys to the draft, but Wisconsin transfers are going to slide in there and keep that front stout. And in the secondary, they're deep, they're experienced, there's playmakers all over. The bottom line is the defense will push people around. They may not be the number one in the conference at that, but number 3 is top realistic. I think they are a top 3 defense in the Big Ten. So here's why I think they're going to shock everybody. Physical teams like this don't disappear late in the season. They wear you down. And they match up really well with finesse offenses like USC. They can slow you down. They can force mistakes. And if the wide receivers step up and keep defenses honest, they are a nightmare matchup. My biggest worry, though, is that there are not going to be enough plays through the air. If teams load the box and Altmaier and the receivers can't punish them, that's a real problem. My ceiling for this team, like I said, it's what Indiana was last year. They can make the playoffs. They can make it to the Big Ten championship game. They can win the Big Ten championship game if they can bully their way into that conversation. However, if that wide receiver room can't produce and the offense becomes one-dimensional, I think they would still finish in the top half of the Big Ten, but they would be short of contending. At number 4, I have the Michigan Wolverines. Last year, it was defense, 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 and an offense that was stuck in second gear. But this year, the quarterback room alone could change everything. The true freshman, Bryce Underwood, is the crown jewel recruit. He's got a huge arm. He's athletic. He's a leader type. He's young and he's raw, but Michigan has not had a quarterback this naturally talented and athletic in a long, long time. And it was a smart move bringing in Chip Lindsey at OC to modernize this attack. And even if Underwood is not ready, they also added a transfer quarterback in Mikey Keene from Fresno State, who is rock solid, proven, and he should basically make it to where the floor for quarterback is higher no matter who they go with. As for the weapons, they did lose their tight end, Colston Loveland, and a dynamic running back in Donovan Edwards, but they added guys like Donovan McCulley from Indiana. He's an all Big Ten wide receiver, and Justice Haynes from Alabama, who's a great running back. So offensively, even though they lost some pieces, I think they're going to be better, which is not super hard because they weren't great last year. The offensive line did lose some pieces, but they recruited well, so they're not going to fall off a cliff or anything. So the bottom line is, even with turnover, like I said, this group has more explosive potential and more big play potential and a higher ceiling than they did last year. On defense, they're still elite up front. They did lose some NFL stars in Mason Graham and Will Johnson, but the front seven are still going to be stacked. Both starting linebackers return, and there's proven depth behind them. The defensive line and edge rush, still top tier. Secondary is a question, though, especially if Rod Moore can't return healthy from that ACL injury. But if he does come back strong, the secondary should be fine. I think even a decent step forward in offense turns this into a much more balanced Michigan team. Defense should still be top 5 nationally, especially if the run defense and pass rush are there. And Bryce Underwood's ceiling is truly special. So I think the one downside here, though, is obviously you're relying on a freshman quarterback. That's risky, even if he does have elite tools. And if the secondary doesn't hold up, elite passing teams could find some cracks. So the ceiling is undefeated. I think this team has what it takes to be undefeated if Bryce Underwood is as good as we expect it to be, and like the rest of the offense is able to match that defense. If not, if there's too many mistakes from the freshmen, it could be like a 9 or 10 win season. But either way, I think this is a better Michigan team. We saw a lot of the players that are new play in that bowl game against Alabama and beat them. Same with Ohio State. So I think this team will be just fine. At number 3, I have the Oregon Ducks. There's a new quarterback. There are new pieces, but the same explosive DNA that kept Oregon near the top. Dan Lanning is building a mean, green, fighting machine in Autzen, and 2025 could prove to be the year they show how quickly they can reload rather than rebuild. Gone is Dillon Gabriel, but in comes Dante Moore. He's got a big arm, he's mobile, and he had the maturity to stick around and learn rather than transferring out of the program. Expect some growing pains early, sure, but Moore's upside is sky high, and landing in that fan base, trust him. Now, they did lose their best wide receiver and probably their best weapon in Evan Stewart to injury, and that stings. He was a huge piece to that vertical game, so losing him is really, really rough. But transfers like wide receiver Mekhi Hughes and Kenyon Medik at tight end can fill that gap. Hopefully, they're both explosive athletes, and there's just still plenty of speed at the skill positions, and they're just younger and less proven, but they're still really, really good. The offensive line is new, but not green. They're replacing multiple starters, yes, but all those new faces are seniors, so the experience could keep Moore protected early. The real question is just going to be whether they can gel quickly enough to avoid those early slip-ups. On defense, that pass rush is a nightmare. They might quietly be the best pass rush in the entire country. The edge defenders are fast, they're nasty, they're deep, and opposing quarterbacks are not going to be able to sleep well when they're going up against this Oregon defensive line. The secondary, there are new faces there, but Lanning's track record on defense is elite. Even with question marks, the back end should be solid. Elite recruiting plus those portal additions means Oregon is not going anywhere. Even with the youth, this is still one of the most talented rosters in the Big Ten, and they're one of the fastest as well. So the ceiling for this team is an undefeated season. I think if Moore clicks quickly and that defense finds a way to terrorize everybody, Oregon could go undefeated and win a national championship. The floor is going to rest in the hands of that, young quarterback, the offensive line, them not gelling. That's going to be how you get that floor, which is about 9 to 10 wins. But I think they're going to be better than 9 wins. And here's where my list may shock a few people, because at number 2, I have the defending national champions, the Ohio State Buckeyes. And you know the drill. They're top 5 in recruiting. They have crazy talent, but 2025 brings some real unknowns. They have a new quarterback, they have new coordinators, and holes in surprising spots. So let's break it down. Julian Sand, the former 5-star recruit originally played for Nick Saban or was recruited by Nick Saban at Alabama, but he might be more talented than recent Ohio State quarterbacks, but he's brand new and unproven at this level. The good news is he'll be standing behind what could be one of the best offensive lines in the country. But the bad news is the running back room is shockingly thin after losing Henderson and Judkins. So right now it's unclear who running back one even is going to be. The weapons are still elite, but they're a bit thinner. Jeremiah Smith obviously is a legit superstar, maybe the best wide receiver in the nation. After him, Carnell Tate is talented, but there's no Emeka Egbuka that's a proven number 2 guy. Max Clare, he transfers in at tight end, and he's a huge addition. He could be a safety blanket for Sayin. As for the defense, they have a strong secondary, but they're a little bit shakier up front this year. They have a new defensive coordinator, and they're replacing all 4 starters on the defensive line. The new guys are highly recruited, and they look like they could be really great, but they're still inexperienced, so there's just not much proven depth there. The back end is rock solid with Caleb Downs, maybe the best DB in the country, maybe even the best player in the country. Then you got Igbenusson and Jermaine Matthews Jr. They will make passing on this team an absolute nightmare. Both coordinators are gone, though, so new schemes on both sides of the ball. So the question is, how quickly can they adapt to everything? Here's where they're still elite, though. They have some insane talent in that pipeline. No team in the Big Ten reloads quite like Ohio State does. Even with the new faces, the baseline is still really, really good. Biggest concerns is, again, the brand new quarterback, the brand new D-line, the new coordinators. It's a lot to fix fast. The running game might be the weakest it's been in years. So the ceiling for this team is still back-to-back. National champions, undefeated, with a win over the rival finally at Michigan. They win it all. That's the ceiling. They could definitely get there. It's pretty easy to see. They're one of the odds favorites to do it. The floor, though, I think is 9-10 or 9 to 10 wins. And that's going to basically happen if the run game sputters, the D-line cracks, and then they end up being, like I said, 9 to 10 wins, but not that top tier. So that's why I have this team at number 2 and not number 1. At number 1, the best team in the Big Ten, I have the Penn State Nittany Lions. Because if not now, when? That's the question Penn State fans all around the country are asking. And it's not an issue of talent. It's, can they finally win the games they usually lose? So let me tell you why I think that this year is Penn State's best chance in years, best window to do this in years. For one, they have a returning quarterback in Drew Aller who is got a huge upside. He's a huge plus, one of the few big teams in the league with a veteran starter. In the backfield, they have Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, maybe the best running back duo in college football. In fact, I'm not going to say maybe, they are the best running back duo in college football. O-line, mostly intact, bringing continuity to that run game and pass protection. And they made some major upgrades at receiver, a position group that desperately needed it after they were handicapped last year because of it. They brought in Pena from Syracuse, who is a reliable number 1 guy. I saw him play at Syracuse. He was a beast. Losing Tyler Warren at tight end obviously hurts a lot, but Luke Reynolds is ready to step up. I expect solid tight end production to continue. The wide receiver room overall looks a lot deeper and more versatile than they were last year. As for defense, they brought in Jim Knowles from Ohio State. He was the DC there, and he's a guy who helped transform that defense into an elite unit. So I think he can do the same thing with a Penn State defense that's already really, really good. Even though they lost Abdul Carter, the best defensive player and the emotional leader of that team, the rest of the defense is still stacked with experience, talented guys. They should still be one of the best units in the Big Ten. And now they have a great defensive coordinator coming in as well. So why do I think this year's different? I think the roster looks like the blueprint that has worked for the last 2 national champions. And that's heavy returning production, continuity at quarterback, and a veteran defense. The difference maker here is Aller's experience. There's no first-year jitters or anything. He knows the system. He knows the league. And he's surrounded by weapons. But they still have to actually do it and beat the big dogs. I mean, that's Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan. They have to beat those teams. The ceiling here, I think, again, since they're number 1, obviously, I believe that they can go undefeated. I think that they can win the Big Ten. I think they can finally beat those big dogs. They are that good. The floor, I think, is them doing the same thing they always do and dropping those frustrating games, finishing as, again, very good, but not great,
10-2 type team. So final word is that Penn State has been good, not great for years, but this is their most complete, experienced, and playoff-ready roster they've ever had since I've been watching. And if they're ever going to do it, it feels like it has to be this year. And that's a wrap on the Big Ten. The teams are stacking up and the race is heating up. But who do you guys think will shock the world? Who's overrated? Drop your hot takes below and make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you guys for watching this video. So yeah, peace.